Okay, I normally don't like to talk about school shootings for a variety of reasons, and I won't get into all of them here. But mostly because school shootings have become far too common, and it's far too controversial, and it's a topic that I don't want to get into politically, and it's just not worth it. But unfortunately, because they are far too common and they are conversations that we have to have, and as I tell my students all the time, school safety is your most important job. But I want to talk about this school shooting incident that happened back in January of 2023 at Richneck Elementary School in Newport News, Virginia. And the verdict from this case that came out, because there's a lawsuit, and we'll get into those in a minute, I think is a cautionary tale for school leaders and school administrators because in this particular case, it was found that the assistant principal was found liable for a teacher getting injured in the shooting. And so I want to kind of go over with you what happened and how did we get to this point. It's tragic in a lot of ways because there's a lot of victims here, but it's just one more thing to be aware of as a school leader as you're navigating this very complicated issues of students that are in crisis, how to handle those crises, and so on. So let's break down what happened with this particular situation so that you have all the information and you take this as a cautionary tale into school leadership. So when you're in that position and you have information that is valuable, you have the tools you need to act upon it. So let's break this down. So again, this is a very sad, very tragic case. I want to break down just some of the major points of what happened here. And I'll post links at the bottom in the YouTube page and the Spotify page so you can see where the story is and you can look it up yourself and read some of the larger details. But essentially here, we have a first grade teacher who is dealing with a student that is seemingly aggressive, is having some challenges, and not only did this particular teacher report to the administration that this child was having some issues and some challenges and kind of had an aggressive mood and was having a rough day. Well, what was also interesting is that this particular student apparently had a gun on campus and was showing this gun to other students. So not only did this first grade teacher, the first grade teacher of the student and other staff members, they reported these occurrences to the administration. They told the administrator that there was a gun on campus, that he had shown the gun to other students. But apparently, the administrator chose, allegedly, to not look for a weapon and prevented a search from even happening. A search was forbidden. And basically dismissed the threat altogether based on the assumption that the child's pocket wasn't the size of a weapon. At least that was what was shared. So even after refusing to search and saying that the student's pockets were too small to even have a weapon, the unthinkable actually eventually happened. The student walked into the classroom and shot his teacher. She was shot in two places. She was shot in the hand, and then she was shot in the chest. The bullet went through the hand and into the chest, and the bullet is actually still lodged in this teacher's chest, which would kind of prevented from some life-threatening injuries. Apparently she went to block, and then it went through her hand, and you can imagine what that scenario would have looked like. And I think what's frustrating here is that this is a 6-year-old doing this level of shooting. So the fact that a 6-year-old had access to a gun, was able to retrieve that gun and then take that gun to school with the intent to shoot his teacher, there is plenty of problems in and of itself. But according to the article, the administrator that was in charge, and this information was reported to by at least 3 people, had an opportunity to investigate and look into these allegations against the student and do something a little bit more. The opportunity was there, and it was ignored. Now, there's a lot to this case and a lot of moving parts, and this is not a legal podcast. whatsoever. And besides, even if I tried to explain all the legal ramifications behind a workers' compensation claim and all the other factors of the case that you can read for yourself, I'm not going to get it right, and I'm not going to do it justice, because the point of this podcast is to talk about educational leadership and what happened in this particular. Because there's a difference between simple negligence and gross negligence. And that's what happened to this administrator in this case. And it was determined that because multiple people had reported what they knew to this administrator, that there was particularly a gun on campus and that this gun had been shown to several people. And because a search was forbidden, she forbade a search completely and didn't do her due diligence to look for a weapon and to investigate this situation, the courts determined that gross negligence took place here. And because of that, the teacher was awarded a $10 million judgment that will be paid out to her. And of course, the assistant principal in this case has lost their job and can no longer be an administrator. And I'm sure there's some other ramifications tied to that as well. Now, what I want my listeners and my viewers to understand, especially if you were in the school leadership business, is that you have got to take these school shooting threats absolutely seriously. You have to. You just have to take every single one that you get. Every single tip has to be followed up on, and you have to investigate. So it's important that if you don't have a protocol for investigating these types of threats, that you have one, that you create one, and that you adhere strictly to your protocol. Zero tolerance for any weapons, any violence of any kind. Report those things to the end. If any kind of warning is made, do a search. You are legally protected to do that. You need to have witnesses there. You have police resources that can help you. Investigate. Do the search. It will save you a lot of time. So make sure you have a protocol for these things. The second suggestion I would say is listen to your staff. Believe them. Empower and trust your teachers. They are the eyes and ears of your campus anyway. You as a school leader can't be everywhere all the time, all at once anyway. So this particular student was flagged as potentially dangerous, and a dangerous situation was reported. You have to create a culture where staff feel safe, they still feel safe reporting, and that they have an expectation that when they report something, that school leaders are going to follow up on those reports. Now, every state is different. I'm not sure how Virginia does things. In Texas, things are done very differently. We're a non-union state. I would expect Virginia to be a union state. So those factors also apply here. And again, we're not going to get into the legal ramifications of collective bargaining versus non-collective bargaining and so forth. But personal accountability obviously has its place in this. And the jury found that the school leader is personally liable for ignoring these warnings and not properly investigating these things. So from a school leadership perspective, if you're going to be sitting in that role, essentially you have to do the job that's in front of you. You have to follow the law, follow the expectations, follow district protocol. All of those things have to be laid out in front of you, because by refusing to do so, you were literally refusing to do your job. And because of that, you are putting other people in danger. And that's what would make you personally liable in this case. And last but not least, when you read the article, one of the things that the defense attorneys argued that no one could have foreseen that this student was going to make the choice to fire the weapon. You can't predict the future. Well, that may be true. But that's not the case when you have multiple reports that have come to you that have said that there's foreseeable harm that could come. The student has a gun on campus. He is showing to other people. He could harm himself. He could harm another student. In this case, he clearly did harm a teacher and could have harmed multiple people. That is foreseeable, and that alone, because of those reports, and then failing to act on those reports, is foreseeable and then preventable. So again, it goes back to making sure that you have a protocol, that you have a system in place, and that you're actually following the things that you're supposed to do, because you can prevent tragedy from happening. And I know that there are school leaders across the country every single day, unsung heroes who are doing these things and are potentially preventing tragedies from happening on their campus. Now, I think this is an important conversation for school leaders to have because similar to this case, which was 2023, there was a school shooting in Michigan, in Oxford, Michigan, back in 2021, and several students died in that school shooting. And then ultimately, as the court case played out, administrators from that school were also sued and tried in a civil lawsuit that the parents had filed, claiming some of the same issues that we're seeing here in this case. Negligence, that somehow the school administrators didn't do their job that could have prevented this tragedy. Now, in that case, in the state of Michigan does provide some immunity for government employees, and school administrators in public schools are considered government employees. So in that case, they were not held liable for that particular school shooting. But that does, again, having to go to court, having to hire an attorney, having to prove that you've done all the right things and followed the protocol, followed the legal steps, that's something that normally you don't expect school leaders and principals to have to do until you're in that situation. Now again, Michigan, also a union state, probably protected by some principal or teachers union, and they have legal attorneys that help with those things. In Texas and some southern states, that's not the case. You likely have to buy into liability insurance through some professional organization or independently when that time comes. But the point, again, of this conversation that I want to emphasize for my school leaders is follow your protocol. Make sure you have a sound protocol in place. Make sure that you are investigating and documenting all incidences as they're reported to you and you're following up on them appropriately. It could save your life, the life of your colleagues, the life of your students, and keep you out of legal trouble. Hi, this is Dr. Jerry Burkett. I'm an assistant professor of educational leadership at Texas Women's University. And look, I know you're searching for an option for an educational leadership program. You want to work on your master's and you want to be a school leader in Texas. And I get it. There are a lot of programs out there and it's really, really hard to differentiate between all the programs that you could possibly go to in the state of Texas. But what sets us apart is that we have designed a program that fits your needs. We know that teachers are busy, they have a lot to do, and that even working on your master's degree isn't going to be your first priority in your life. So at Texas Women's University, our program is 100% online. We have 7-week options and 16-week options to fit your schedule. Most importantly, you're not going to feel that online isolation that comes with other programs. You're going to get to know the professors here. You're going to get one-on-one advising. And when it's time for you to take that very important 268 and 368 principal certifications exams, you're going to be more than ready. In fact, we have our students take and pass the exams before they even start their internship, so that when you graduate, you'll be fully certified and ready for your first job as an assistant principal. And when you're ready for that next step, 21 hours of your master's program can transfer into our educational leadership and organization doctoral program. So for more information, go to twu.edu and search educational leadership. There's no other best option for your master's degree program anywhere in the state of Texas. So check us out and apply today. All right, I'm going to be vulnerable here and honest, talking about cell phone bans. And I was on the fence about cell phone bans when they first came out. Texas just recently passed one, so we're now experiencing our first school year with a cell phone ban, and that's in this year. And I've seen or heard the same sorts of conversations online. Our students need access, and parents need to be able to contact their students, and then a lot of Gen Xers like me were like, well, our parents never really even knew where we were half the time, much less needing access to us during the day. So I've heard all of those arguments, and I've also heard arguments for, special needs students who are prone to leaving campus, and they wear Apple Watches or other tracking devices so we can find them whenever they decide to leave school. I've heard those arguments. Totally get all of that. And then the other side of the coin, the cell phones are a distraction, social media anxieties, student learning, student engagement is down. I was always the person that, why aren't we leveraging this free technology? Why aren't we doing that? That was always my position as a school leader and a school administrator. I always thought that students are coming to school with a free computer. That's how I looked at it. This is a device that we don't have to provide to students. And I know not everybody has a cell phone, and not everybody has the same data plan, and there's all of that information as well. And it took me some time to learn and understand that. But for those who do have it, if we're able to leverage that technology and have the internet at our fingertips and be able to access it whenever we can, I was fine with that. And yes, lock down browsers and blocking certain websites and all of those things. So there's a million different ways you can go with this conversation, and I haven't even talked about artificial intelligence and the introducing Gemini, ChatGPT, Copilot, and all of the others that have crept up and will continue to creep up into the education space, and who should use it, how it should be used. I wrote a book chapter on the ethical use of AI and what school leaders should be thinking about, and there's a lot to think about. And the problem with technology, I'm going to tangent here for a minute, is that it moves so quickly that policy, procedure, legal structures can't keep up quick enough. And you start to see, a divide on where people stand on whether this technology, how accessible should it be, where should it be accessible, whether it's in the education space or in the workspace. And so we're going to continue to have those conversations as the use of AI increases and data centers begin getting built. And all that aside, for this segment, I just want to focus on cell phones, because the data is coming in now. And Texas is a little behind on banning it, but other states had done so. And in some cases, you just can't bring it to school, or if you bring it to school, Yonder is what it's called. It's a magnetic pouch. My first experience with Yonder was I went to a stand-up comedy show at a very large arena, and when we walked into the venue, we had to give up our cell phone. They handed this magnetic pouch, and then you had to hand it back, and we're like, "What is this?" Because you weren't allowed to have your phone during the show. And look, from a cultural standpoint, I got to tell you, my family and I, we rarely even go to movies anymore. We love movies. We rarely go anymore because for some reason, for that hour and a half, 2 hour space, there's somebody in the movie theater that cannot be off their phone. And they don't have this awareness about them that blue screen is impacting us in a dark theater, even if you have the volume down, and some people don't. Which reminds me, I just saw this week that United Airlines is requiring all passengers, if you're going to be on a device on their airplane, laptop, tablet, cell phone, whatever, you have to have headphones. Which blows my mind that people would, even for a moment, watch a movie, listen to music, play a game, and not have headphones on in that tiny, cramped fuselage space. How rude are people? But it reminded me, even at my gym, there's a similar sign. If you're going to listen to music, make sure you have your headphones in and have them at a reasonable level so that the person working out next to you doesn't hear what you're listening to. All of those serve as these worldly distractions related to using a cell phone. And in a school context, mind you, our data is in. Student anxiety has been reduced, which is amazing. We have countries that are banning social media altogether for students under a certain age. because of depression, anxiety, the stress levels that come with social media. All that science is available, and we know what social media is doing to our kids. So now we know anxiety is down. Not only that, but the constant checking, notifications. I'm even battling that now. I get way too much notifications on my phone from the things that I feel like I need to have information about: news, sports, weather, emails, texting, whatever. My phone is going off constantly, and I'm trying to find a way around it. So student anxiety is there. It's going down. That's a good thing. Engagement is up. Students are paying attention. They're listening in lessons. They're watching lectures. They're paying attention to teachers. That's a good thing. The people that seem to be against, and I know teachers are favorite, but the pushback is coming from parents, which is strange. This millennial Gen Alpha group, maybe a handful of Gen Xers out there, but this millennial group feels like they need constant access to their kiddos during the day. And look, I get it. In this, they are the digital age generation. So because they are the digital age generation, they don't know a world without access, unlike us Gen Xers and beyond. We know a world without access. We just had to adopt it as it came our way. We know a world without cell phones, flat screen TVs. I had a corded phone growing up, so I'm a little different. But millennials, they want that constant access. And what I think, though, is that I think their kids, though, are okay with not having that constant access, because I think the anxiety that students are feeling outside of notifications and social media is that constant text from their parents telling them, reminding them to do things. Kids don't need that. They got enough pressures coming from teachers and peers. They don't need the added pressure coming from their parents during the course of a school day. So this is one of those things where, and I've borrowed this phrase, new information, new opinion, okay? Because an opinion should be rooted in some sort of fact and information. I don't believe any of us should be walking around with unguarded opinions, because that's not safe for anybody. If you want unguarded opinions, go to Twitter. It's full of unguarded opinions, and it's a terrible, hateful place, full of unguarded opinions. But new information, new opinion. I have new information now. I reserve the right to change my opinion, and I agree. We don't need cell phones in the classroom. I have changed my mind on that completely. The access of technology, we don't have to have 24-hour access to technology, and it doesn't have to be the sole teaching tool that we use in our schools. I've moved beyond that. Technology has its useful place to change our productivity and to make life easier, but we don't have to have 24-hour access to it. So I have changed my opinion on it. What I think school leaders need to know, and school leaders need to be focused on, is you only have so much time to mold and shape a student. You get 6 to 7 hours a day, and that time is precious. We are literally fighting for the cognitive real estate of our students so that we can teach, make them successful, mold them into successful, productive citizens, provide curriculum, and be the strong instructional leaders that we're supposed to be. So I just have to pose the question, is that parents' peace of mind to have that constant access, is it worth the student's peace of mind? Because I would argue it's not. We don't need parents constantly harping on our students, constant access, reminding them that dinner's at 5:30 today, not at 6 because you've got baseball practice tonight. That's a notification that's not necessary. And maybe those conversations should happen on the front end. Have better planning, have a better calendar, have a better system of communication. And look, not judging people. No, not doing that. I'm a non-judger. But in the scope of school and taking care of our students, taking care of our teachers' needs, I got to say, I'm changing my mind on it. I think the cell phone ban was probably a pretty good idea. Probably need to talk to a few more teachers about it who are in the trenches and who are living this reality every single day. But now that I've seen some of this data that's come out, student anxiety is down, student engagement is up. Kids seem to be managing without it. I've heard stories that they're bringing CD players to school, Walkmans. Instead of texting, they're using Google Docs. They're finding ways. Life always finds a way. But they've learned that they don't have to have 24-hour access to their cell phone. And because of that, we might be making kids, helping them become better human beings, healthier human beings, helping their mental health, improving their student outcomes. I can't say that's a bad thing. I'm good with this. Cell phones. So I'd like to know more. If you are a school that doesn't have cell phones, tell me about it. I'd like to know more about it. Send me an email to the school below. I'd love to hear about it. We'll talk about it in the next thing. But you know what? Cell phone, lockbox movement, Dr. Burkett, all about it. All right, welcome back to the School Rules Podcast. I'm Dr. Jerry Burkett here with Professor Zest himself, Gabriel V. Hill. Welcome to the show. I'm glad you reached out to me, and we're ready to just dive in and have some real talk about education. Is that where we're at?
That's exactly where we're at. Professor Zest, boy, there's a whole story with that name, by the way.
Yeah, let's get right into that. I want to hear all about that. Tell me, where does Professor Zest come from?
All right, well, let's do this. Here we go. So, first off, once again, my name is Gabriel V. Hill. Teaching 23 years, Southern California. About 5 years ago, I started a YouTube channel. It was called Professor Zest, but I have rebranded to be the classroom management guy. And how I got the name, just so you know, was, gosh, about 15 years ago. I think about 15 years ago, I had a student. His name was Sweezy, was his name. So I was taught at the high school. And he came into my class one day and I said, how's it going, Sweezy? And he goes, it's going zesty. I go, what? Zesty? What does that mean? He goes, it means good. And I'm like, all right. And so ever since then, I've been using the words, because he was one of the cool guys. You want to be like one of the cool guys. And ever since then, I've been using the word Zesty's my gamer tag name and everything else. But once I really started honing in on the YouTube channel, I said, actually, let's change the name to exactly what I'm all about. And that's the classroom management. So rebranding, classroom management guy, but Professor Zest sounds just as good.
I love that. And one of your students brands you that. So
That's right.
that's even better, right? So classroom management. Now, I long ago when I did my dissertation, I did my dissertation on classroom management. And what I was looking at was I was comparing a group of alternative certified teachers with traditionally certified teachers, but the difference is they were both entering their first year of teaching. Mm-hmm. So just comparing two groups. And one thing I have to let my students just constantly remind them that classroom management and discipline, two separate things. Discipline is a part of your classroom management. So tell me, how did you get into classroom management as being your coaching passion?
So here we go. Let's buckle in for the kids. As the kids say, let's lock in here. Here we go. So when I first started teaching, that was my weakness for sure, was classroom management. I think with all new teachers, that's a hard thing to get down, is the classroom management. But for me, it really was a weakness, to the point I remember my principal came to me and he had one of those talks. He says, I don't think this is working out. And you never want that. I don't think it's working. I'm like, oh no, what does this mean? I got a family, I got kids and everything else. So he paired me up with another teacher, a veteran teacher. And I made it through that first year. He kept me around for his second year. But it really wasn't until, I would say honestly, my seventh year that I finally got comfortable with being a teacher. But all that time period, it was classroom management was a struggle. And I didn't know what exactly I was doing right. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. I'm a grown man. I go home crying, I'm 30 something years old, then 40. And those kids broke me down. As the years go on, there's not like a defining moment, just each year it gets a little bit better. And then I remember I found myself in the back of the classroom with another teacher and he goes, He goes, hey, what are you doing differently here? I go, what do you mean? He goes, the kids in this class, in other classes, they're out of control, but in this class, I mean, they actually they're working. And that blew my mind. Like, wow, really? And I finally realized I got to the point where classroom management was no longer a struggle for me.
Mm.
And then I really started thinking, how could I share what I've learned or gained along the way with other teachers? Because years I almost quit 1,000 times, and I hear teachers all the time that are quitting, and the main reason, at least from my opinion, and most of the data shows it, is that classroom management struggle, one way or the other, classroom management struggle. And I thought there's got to be something I can do to help them make it through those initially, because we both know those initial years are the crucial ones. And if you make it past the first, 5, 6 years, then you got a chance at this. And so that became my mission. That became my passion, is just helping those new teachers make it through those hard years so they can actually find happiness in this career.
So inside of that classroom management, what's the area that they struggle the most in? Where are you finding? Is it the policies, procedures? Is it what is it that they're really having the most hard time with?
Well, I think it all goes back to what's the name of the book a long time ago? Oh, I can't think of the gentleman, Mr. Wong?
Harry Wong,
Harry
First Days of
Wong.
School. Yeah.
There you go, right? That's the classic. And he talks about rules and procedures, rules and procedures. That's what you got to do. And I remember reading the book over and over again. I thought, I'm doing this, rules and procedures. And I think that's what most teachers are lacking, are those rules and procedures. But I'm trying to think, I felt like I was doing that as a new teacher. And it was interesting because I actually talked with another teacher here a couple of days ago. He's like, I think 3 years into it. And first year he was struggling, but this year he seems to do a pretty good job. I said, what's the difference? He goes, you know what? I've always heard rules and procedures, and I had rules and procedures in my classroom, but I realized it wasn't really part of the classroom. It's something I was doing, but it wasn't like baked into the classroom. It wasn't built in. And he said it wasn't even built into my identity. I was trying things and I thought I was doing it, but it really wasn't the full package. And I think that's the first thing new teachers really need to focus on, is those rules and procedures. Find out what works for them. And they're definitely get different ideas of other people, but they got to really start honing in. And the sooner you get that locked in, the sooner your classroom becomes better. So for me, I think that's probably the thing most new teachers would need to work on.
So your methods, the things that you teach and coach other teachers, can they work across all content areas? Like, what if I'm a science teacher dealing with all these labs and I've got magnesium and chemistry stuff everywhere, and kids are going to get burned and blow up the building? What is this going to work for everybody? Talk me through your methods a little bit.
100%. And once again, there's no magic bullet. There really is no. I mean, I wish there was, but there's not. But yeah, it applies everywhere. I mean, and the thing is, you got to find out what works for you. Because I've been in other classrooms and I'm thinking, man, I love how they do that. I don't like how they do that. This is what I would change. And then people come to my classroom and the same thing, right? You got to find what works for you, but it does apply everywhere. So whatever routines you have, for example, here's one I live and die by, and I call it the warm-up procedure, warm-ups, some way, bell ringer, what do you want to call it? But I believe that is essential in a classroom, that you got to have something students to do when they first come to class. And it can't be a guessing game. It can't always change. It's got to be a constant. Because the moment students walk into that classroom, they got to know what they're expected to do. And so that, for example, is something in my classroom. What I do are sometimes definitions, sometimes map skills. But in science class, it may be something different. It may be vocabulary, maybe something else. Whatever is specific to that subject is what you want to put in place. But you have to have some sort of warm-up procedure, some sort of bell ringer. That's like one thing that goes across all disciplines. And then, of course, applies to any kind of subject. But those rules, procedures, you have to have them in place. It creates that structure that allows everything else to function.
So the students come in, they have that moment of engagement, that piece that gets them locked into the class for that day. But kids have bad days, right? Not everybody is perfect. Even us adults, we struggle. So what's your method for handling the students that start to have bad days, get off task, lack of engagement? Friday when a full moon is happening, like walk me through your strategies for helping those kids out.
All right. I was watching, I'm not sure what was that. I was almost sure it was TikTok or YouTube, but they're talking about rules and procedures are pre-discipline, I think they said something like that. Because the more structured your class is, and and not structured in a bad way, but formulated, structured to the point where students have a predictability and everything else. The better you are at that, and I was talking with another gentleman, his name is Dr. Woodley, I believe his name was. He was talking about triggers. And I read, what does he mean by triggers? And then it made sense. That's what the purpose of rules and procedures are, is to avoid those triggers. So, for example, if a student is constantly out of their seat poking people, the problem is the poking the people. But the trigger for that is them being out of their seat. So if you control that trigger, then you avoid the ultimate response or ultimate behavior issue, which is the poking. And so the better you are at the structure, the less you're going to have those students that really act out. Now, there are, like I said, there's going to be those full moons. For sure, there's going to be the full moons. And nothing runs perfectly. But the more you have that in place, the less things like that happen. But when they do happen, same thing. You have to already have a plan for it. And it's the same thing as I already know how I'm going to respond to my students. I know the way I'm going to approach them. I'm not going to be angry. I'm not going to lose my temper. It's going to be like a dad. It's going to be the whole, hey, I expect more from you. And so all these things I already have in my head because of several years of going through it. And eventually you kind of hone in what happens. So my advice is anybody that comes across those students that are having a hard time, you're going to start gaining nuggets. Every year you start gaining more and more things that work. And eventually you can put it together so that it becomes yours. But a key element of all that is, first of all, don't take things personally. Never take things personally. There's more going on in these kids' lives than I will ever know, and more things I ever had to experience. So never take it personally. And then always be the adult. Always remain calm. And when you approach them, here's I think the thing that puts it all together. You're not attacking the student. You're not saying the student is bad, but it's their behavior that you're addressing. And so if you're able to address their behavior, you have more chance of changing that behavior because it does not become as personal for them. So you are going to have those students. The better you have the overall classroom management, less things that pop off. But when they do pop off, you already got to have a plan put in place. And that just comes with time as you start picking things that have worked for you in the past.
Talk to me a little bit about your school and the students that you work with and the population of kids that come through and how you're able to build that relationship with them.
So this is the great part. Since I've been doing this for a long time, a lot of times you don't get to see the fruit of your labors. You just don't. Especially in elementary and middle school, you don't see it. But since I've been doing this for a long time, I've seen like the one gentleman I mentioned to you, Sweezy was his name, former student. We actually hang out once in a while now. He actually came back to my school to do a concert for us, right? And so you get to see the fruits of labor as the years go on, but a lot of times you don't have that. And so what you got to cling on to are those little moments where things seem to be going right. And so for my school, Southern California, Riverside County, I'm trying to think of the population that we have. Definitely a high Hispanic population, socioeconomically challenged population, and everything else. But what I found is I've always heard that, when students come in your class, you're supposed to check their roster to get some background information, but I never do that because I don't want to be jaded by my preconceived notions of who they are, what they're going through. And honestly, when they come in the classroom, it's an open book. They're on level ground, and I treat everybody as closely as I possible to being the same. And then that's kind of how I deal with most of the students is I like the term respect. I respect them because I have that fatherly thing going on. I can also joke with them. It's a fine line that you try to walk as a teacher. But the best part is when you've been doing this a long time, you do get to see the fruits of your labor, and that just makes you go back at it again, try even harder to form those relationships, because ultimately that's what you're looking for at the end are those relationships.
Talk to me a little bit about discipline and your philosophy in handling that. You've mentioned a little bit of it, but talk to me a little bit about that.
Gosh, I love this question. First of all, um, regarding the discipline, I honestly believe the hardest job ever is being a vice principal or dean at a middle school. That has to be the hardest job possible because you're right. It all just comes to you and it never stops. I remember I was last year, I had to cover the dean for like a couple weeks. And that was the most exhausted I have ever been in my 20 something years of teaching was being dean for 3 weeks. I'm like, oh my gosh, But yeah, so regarding discipline, in my classroom, actually, I believe in general, the whole goal of discipline is to change behavior. That is it. That is it. It's not to punish a student, is not to make a statement about who they are or anything like that. It's just simply to change behavior. And so how I look at this, whatever I can do to change behavior, I consider that a form of discipline. It could be positive discipline, negative. Discipline's not a bad thing. It's just about, having that, like when we talk about working out, it's good to have self-discipline to control yourself and everything else. And so anytime I discipline a student, it's not with the goal of punishing them. It is with the goal of hoping to change their behavior. And so for me, the best thing I found out is I think it's called progressive discipline. Give you an example. A student's in my class and they're walking around. The first thing I might do is just it's always Johnny. So let's use Johnny, right? Johnny, sit down. If Johnny sits down, that's it. That's the discipline. That's the behavior I was looking for. We're great. That's all I'm trying to do is try to alter behavior. If he gets up again and starts walking around, then I might do something and say, Johnny, just see me after class. And so each time I'm amping up, the idea is you amp it up just a little bit to alter behavior. Because what happens many times, at least I find with the new teachers, is those problems are in the classroom and they're like, man, I just can't deal with this. I can't deal with this. Then finally it gets to the point where they go from 0 to 60 like that. And then they yell, out of my classroom. And nothing gets changed. No behavior changed. Nothing's ever been addressed before. They couldn't handle it more and they got frustrated. And that was the only solution they had. Because they haven't, as you mentioned, been trained, haven't practiced, haven't got this idea down of fixing the problem when it's small before it escalates. So in my classroom, that's kind of what I try to put in play is that progressive discipline. Try to catch problems when they're little, create that culture, first of all, so nothing pops off. But when it does, try to take it a little bit at a time and try to make sure I don't go to the extreme. Because you're right, once it goes to the office, there's not much more you can do.
It's out of your control. Yeah.
And to be honest with you, a lot of times there's not much more knowing this, not much more admin can do as well. There's only certain limitations. And so you still have to deal with the problem one way or the other when they come back.
Yeah, you mentioned on your website about taking care of the small stuff. So I assume that's part of your discipline philosophy is just take care of the little things so they don't become big, raging forest fires, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So talk to me about your YouTube channel. Like, how did it start? Like, where did you started, this all started somewhere. You found your philosophy, you found your method. So did you build a website? Did you do your social media? Talk to me about how this grassroots campaign kind of started for you. You've got a lot of followers on YouTube. I'm jealous.
So the story goes like this. 5 years ago, back in the classroom, with that teacher I mentioned before, his name was Mr. Enriquez, and he leans over and says, what are you doing differently here? And I remember I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't, this is just what I do now. This is just who I am. And this is what the class is. And I said, I don't know. And then I remember, I think with the weekend came and I started thinking to myself, what am I doing differently? And I started having I'm not sure what existential crisis or what it is, but I started questioning where did I start from? How I get to here and what am I doing? And I really started thinking to myself, man, I wonder if this is beneficial to the teachers. And I remember Enrique said, you got to share this with other people. And I said, how would I do that? And I started, I don't know. And I started thinking, because up to this point, I was doing things with the district. I was mentoring and stuff of that sort. But as ironically is, you would never think being a teacher, but very much introvert, very much to myself. And I thought maybe a YouTube channel. And that scared the light out. That just scared me oh man, that's awful. Especially when we do our own editing. You have to watch your image and voice over and over. But I thought maybe this might be helpful for somebody. And so 5 years ago, started with Professor Zest, but then later on, the classroom management guy. And just trying to thought, what do I do? How do I explain it to you? And that in itself it's one thing to do something, but when you have to really break down what you do, it's like teaching, right? You know how to solve the problem, but how do you explain to somebody how to solve the problem, a student? You got to really break it down. And I started breaking down everything I was doing and think, oh, so this is what, okay, this makes sense. Now, and I started putting things together, formulating ideas, opinions, try to just to explain how my classroom is ran. And so then I started making videos and posted it out there and everything else. And and so I kind of made that my mission going forward is to help out teachers in general, but mainly those new teachers, just kind of make it through those hard years. I remember how hard it was for me. And I thought there's got to be something to do. And so my focus, my YouTube channel now is mainly helping those teachers make it to those first couple of years. So that way they can have a career in education. Because I think it's a great career. It's hard. And especially the first years, they're going to break you. But if you finally get your footing, it's so rewarding, so rewarding.
So, if I want my teachers to know more about Professor Zest, what do they need to do? I'm looking at your website now. We're going to go to professorzest.com, and then you have a 20-day transformation. Talk to me about that.
You know what? Actually, it's a course I have, but in all honesty, because actually the website I'm probably going to revamp and everything else. So who knows how long that's going to be there for? Or I'm not a computer guy, so I might get rid of it completely. Who knows how that goes? The best consistent thing would be YouTube. I've been consistent with that for 5 years. Planning to do it for another 10 years until I retire. So that'd be the best place for people to reach me is on the YouTube channel. Has all the videos I have. It has my email link on there. That anybody can send me an email if there's anything I can help with. I mean, that is my goal in my teaching life right now is to help as many teachers as possible. So the best way to get a hold of me would to go to YouTube, and I think it's going to be under the classroom management guide. Be the best place to get a hold of me right now.
Okay. Well, and the links will be posted here to this podcast and also on all of our socials. Gabriel, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I hope we could talk soon and talk more about education.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.